kind of like the same thing. I have pretty much every effect that I would could possibly use in a record within reason already kind of like loaded up. So there's my first 10 banks on console 1 are just effects. There's a quarter note, half note, and eighth note delay. There's ocean waves. There's Capitol Hills, Capitol Chamber, sorry, and a few other things. But like I find that like kind of having all that stuff in there and just like loading up all the files, kind of like putting them on the right tracks and all that, and then mixing from there turns out a lot better, or it's a lot quicker. I try not to like second guess myself a whole lot, where it's just like how I feel at that time, you know. And then so like I'll do like the mix, print it, like see how far I'll get in like an hour, you know. Print it down, go listen, and then kind of come back and work on it in like VSX and kind of switch out monitors and all that stuff. And I'm basically like taking the sum average of like all the different listening environments and just whatever sounds the best on all of those. That's the version that we ultimately end up going with.
So you'll do like multiple. So correct me if I'm wrong. You'll do like a few different mixes, and then you'll kind of see which one sounds the best on the most systems.
Sort of. So like I do like the first pass, and I kind of like see just where we're at. Like, oh, I missed something here. It's like, oh, it actually needs editing here or something like that. So it's like first pass, second pass. I'm doing stuff in VSX, so I'm like usually swapping between like 3 different rooms in there, and then print it, listen to it again on a few different like real world applications, like playing on a PA room downstairs, different areas really, and making some notes and then doing that. So it's like
just referencing and just kind of figuring out what to fix via the referencing, basically
checking different listening environments. The kind of cool thing about VSX is I don't really have to do like the car test. So I do the car test in there.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've had a lot of success with VSX, so I'm just curious how that went for you. I've like, you know, you see it, it's like, is it all hype? Is it good? Some people trash on it. Like, I know that you've had good experience with it. Can you talk about that?
Yeah,
I'm curious.
So if you don't know, VSX is actually some headphones. They model different rooms and the speakers that they have in there. So they have different like ear profiles, because like a big way of how you hear things is like just that ear shape, you know, like how big that hole is in there. And that's kind of like what their profiles are based off of. Like specifically, I think the way that Steven like kind of said that it was...
This is Steven Slate.
Steven Slate, yeah. The way that he said it was like kind of calibrated was like whether or not like AirPods would stay in your ear. So, yeah. And so like there's been kind of like this like whole lot of like grayness to it. And so like there's 2 different profiles that you can choose from with like a slider in between. So I'm like in between just because I'm not sure. That's where I tend to prefer it, at least where it sounds pleasant to me. And like the first time that you listen to it, it's going to sound really weird because it's emulating not only the speakers, but like the room, you know? So it's almost like you're standing in the room, but like not sitting exactly in front of it, so to speak. Like whenever you listen to your mix in your room, but like not in your listening position, that's kind of what it's like. Yeah. And so like, or at least that's what it sounds like to me. And so, yeah, I ended up like just taking an average of what sounds good and all the ones that I care to really like listen to it in. But to be honest, there's probably like 5 or 6 different rooms that I reference in there. It's really cool because you don't even really need an interface. You can just plug it into the back of your computer or if you're like on a laptop or something.
Yeah, just take it and go.
Yeah, that's the really cool thing about it, especially because the room that I'm currently in isn't really super optimal. It's kind of right next to a road, and you can hear it sometimes. It's been helping a lot with the move because it's kind of like it gives you like a constant place to kind of like nothing's ever really changing in there. Whereas like in your room,
right,
you know, you might have something different in there that one day. you might have more people in there one day or something like that, and you're trying to like do things, and it's like every time you add something to the room, it's going to change the sound in some random way that you're not really going to be able to kind of discern right away.
Yeah, totally. Well, are you using it from the get-go, or do you start off kind of on your monitors and then you kind of take it from there?
I start off on my monitors, and I get it pretty far with just that, and then so it's like mixing on the monitors for like an hour, breaking for like 20 minutes, coming back, mixing for like another hour in various rooms in the VSX, breaking, and then doing some kind of combination of VSX and the monitors, and then I'm usually done after that.
Wow, so about 3 hours for a mix. That's crazy.
Well, it turns out to being like 4 because you got to factor in your breaks.
Breaks are important.
Yeah, especially because
time well spent.
Yeah, because I mean, you need like that. For me, like I DJ'd a lot, and so like my ears are kind of like, especially this year, like it's kind of shot because like I used to monitor on this year, and club environments are kind of super loud, and
yeah, gotta
doing
be
that
careful
for like 8 hours or something, it'll kind of mess with you after a while. And
oh man,
yeah, it's like if my allergies aren't bad, like I can hear fine, but if my allergies are kind of bad, like today, like it's all sorts of warbly right now.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
I'm just like, I'm not going to make any important decisions today.
Party too hard in your 20s, man.
It's not a party when you do it every day.
Yeah, right.
At that point, I mean, because like I was like a resident DJ and stuff like that, and it was
wow,
every night kind of thing, and like we did like house parties and all this other stuff, and it was just how I was paying bills.
Did you have any like lessons from doing like DJing that you kind of think are applicable to the studio, or is it just a completely different world?
I feel like with DJing in particular, you kind of get a better idea of like what's more popular, or like what could potentially be more of a hit, really. A lot of it, you're either taking some top 40 song and turning it into something truly atrocious, or you're
at the very least a bit more danceable,
I mean, well, with me, I guess it would be pretty atrocious just because it was like dubstep and bass house at the time, but music that didn't age well.
So basically just keep it up with the trends and knowing what's hot.
Basically. Oh, and you also kind of get a better idea for like arrangement and that kind of stuff, and phrasing and structuring and all that kind of. You always know that there's going to be like, yeah, exactly. Like there's usually going to be a bridge right after like that second hook or chorus or whatever. Or it might even be like right a little before. But, most of the time you're working with like 8-bar sections. Like, just because if you change it every 4 bars, it's too much. But like 8 bars, it's kind of like where everyone expects some kind of new change to happen. So things like that.
So,
just kind of.
How often to switch things up, and yeah, absolutely. Well, your mixes sound super super awesome. So clearly the VSX and the and your monitoring situation is working for you. Are you mixing into a stereo bus? Like, what does that look like for you? Or are you kind of more of like, let's leave the mastering engineer to kind of take care of all that stuff?
So for like the longest time, I didn't mix into like a 2-bus compressor, and I actually started recently doing that. Maybe I say recently, it's been like a year now, but I started doing that more because like how my workflow went at one point in time, like I would kind of like do like the mix and the master up until a certain point, and then I would export that and do limiting using some hardware version of like the Better Maker or something like that. And it was actually after talking to like Matthew Weiss on like whether or not like you can actually get like that sound from hardware or something in the box. And it was like, what I really wanted was more compression. Like after like actually listening to it and then like just trying it out, like, oh, I just wanted more compression. I don't actually need to use this hardware compressor. So I mix into a Fairchild 620 from UAD. That's my 2-bus along with, I guess, the virtual mix rack, doing very minimal stuff, really. I think it's Bomber. That's what it was. FG Bomber.
Oh, really? That's like the 1176, like all in, you know?
No, Bomber is the it's like a dynamics processor. It's not like a actual compressor. Like it either makes it more compressed or it like almost does like expansion or something.
Oh, okay.
So like it gives
Cool.
it kind of like it either gives it more compression or it takes away some of your transients. And it's usually like just it's like on like this fat setting or whatever. And it's just
Right, there's like fat and tight or something. Yeah.
that's the one.
It's one of the plugins that I like just don't use. I don't know why. Maybe I should try it out.
It just does something random, and I put it on there years ago, and I never took it off. Kind of the same thing with like Pultecs. Like I feel like everyone has like a Pultec on their master bus. It ended up on there one time. It just never came off, and now it's just the sound.
Yeah, there's something about the Pultec. So Ken Lewis, who I recently had on the show, was like on one of his mixing nights, he was talking about how like the Pultec is just like, listen, like I'm pulling up 100 hertz, listen to what it does in 500 hertz. I was like, holy shit, it just brings out so much musicality out of a mix. There's something about the Pultec that's so, I don't know, just does that so well.
It like focuses that kick so well too. Like I don't know, like it sounds so much better like whenever you just kind of like focus the kick in with the Pultec a little bit around like 100 or something, because most of the time it's going to be around there. And
for me 100 is usually like more the bass guitar territory. I'm like usually in the 60 hertz area for kick. Not always, but it depends.
That's usually hip hop.
Maybe it's a hip hop thing. I don't really mix hip hop, so well, maybe you could give me a little bit of a deep dive on hip hop. Like I mean, I guess hip hop mixers are from what I understand, they are mixing into stereo bus compression. It's not just like limiting. Is that something you find to be the case?
I don't know. The sound of hip hop to me is just compression, like in particular, just because it's especially like the bass. Like the bass up until a certain point, like maybe around like 120 is probably whenever you would start really noticing like where you'd want the compression. And if you compress below that too much, it like just gets kind of weak in a way, just because it's the first thing that's hitting the compressor, and it's getting the most gain reduction on it most of the time.
So it's like about multiband limiting basically, or multiband compression.
I personally don't really do a whole lot of multiband because like I really push to get like the multi tracks for the beats, which it's kind of hard sometimes, but you do what you do.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't really tend to do a whole lot of multiband compression. Usually if I do something, like the closest that I do to is like, I'll use like the little sidechain filter on like the Fairchild 670 from UAD. There's that the sidechain thing, and basically like everything below whatever you set it to, it doesn't take it in, but everything above it is getting compressed. So like that's the closest that I get to multiband compression.
Right, so you're kind of letting the low end kind of live and be dynamic and full, and you kind of compress the mid-range or the low bass, the higher bass in the mid-range and up.
Yeah, because that's a lot of times that's kind of what you really want to hear, or at least that's what I feel like I want to hear as like a bass music fan. Like there's just so much power in that range, and a lot of times whenever you hear like a very like amateurish like first recording or something like that, and you hear vocals over like just like a 2-track or something like that, and it just sounds like super hollow and there's not like a whole lot of weight to it. It's usually something to do with compression, really, if not just getting rid of a lot of noise. In hip hop, they make it with whatever they have around. Sometimes it's an SM57, sometimes it's their phone. You got to make do with that. Yeah, it's very yeehaw. Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit more about Luna, because you're only like the second guy on the show who's mentioned that they work mostly in Luna. From what I understand, it has like amazing console kind of tones, but it's still a little bit limited as far as like a DAW. It doesn't have all the the features. Maybe that's changed since I think the guy I spoke to who was using it was Lucas Guino, which was maybe 50 episodes ago. So I don't know, like where's Luna at?
I think it's getting really close. So last week they added sidechaining to it and MCU support. So I have my old controller actually working in Luna now. So a lot of the things that people were complaining about, it's starting to like not be a thing anymore.